Do you believe in alternate universes?
You are listening to Delayed Replay.
The improvised movie review podcast. Wink.
Everything is fine here. We're all fine. Just sit tight and listen to them talk about the movies they definitely saw.
Don't delay. We have to listen right away.
Hello, listeners. This is Steven Schinder, your host, as always, back with another episode of Delayed Replay, where we talk about movies, and it's available on channel 1138, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I feel like I rarely say where this is available, so that's why I'm kind of tripping over myself saying where it's available. But yeah, on this episode, talking Top Gun Maverick, which came out in June. And with me to talk about it is Vinny Tangherlini.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. How are you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, man. I watched both movies last night. I watched OG and Top Gun 2, so I'm ready to chat.
Nice. Yeah, people I know are still going to see this, and yeah, we'll get into what we think about it. So I guess first we'll start off with our experiences with the first film. So, well, this is a little peek behind the scenes, but when I was trying to figure out who to have on this episode, I made this post where I was who on my friends list is a really big Top Gun fan or something like that. And I think you were the first person to respond with me. And so I was oh yes, this is going to be fun.
That sounds right. I love Top Gun. For no good reason. It's one of those movies that's so bad it's good, but I just love the every dude is sweaty and flirting with every other dude the whole movie. It's like someone wrote, I said this to someone last night, but it's like someone wrote sort of weird Navy pilot fan fiction and then submitted it, but made subtle tweaks so that movie producers were oh, this is just a good movie.
Yeah, so my experience with the first one is kind of limited. I was trying to look up when the first time I watched it ever was, and apparently in March of 2011, I just wrote up a post where I was just Top Gun with an exclamation point at the end. So that was the first time I watched it, and I didn't watch it again until this year, before watching Maverick. Something I realized the second time watching this is that much of the movie I wouldn't enjoy very much without the music. A lot of what happens in the first half or so is just kind of slice of life type of stuff. Until you get to what happens with Goose, and then it gets more interesting to me anyway. So
Sure.
yeah, it's kind of weird to think about because Top Gun is considered a classic, and I looked up the Rotten Tomatoes consensus. I was kind of surprised, but also not, to see that the audience score was 83 and the critic score was 54, and I can kind of understand where the critics are coming from, because to me anyway, it feels not a lot happens in some of it, and it kind of feels to me one of those 80s movies that people who love the 80s are obligated to love or whatever.
Totally.
I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the impression I got.
It's the arc is so simple. There's these two best buds, right? And one of them really has to go through a humbling experience. And the whole movie is him just being humbled, but also still getting everything he ever wanted. So it's this weird, he's still the hero, even though he needs, the thing he needs is to be taken down multiple pegs, but also he's the hero of the movie, so he still has to he has to go down a few pegs, but also win overall. He still gets the girl, he still gets, the victory at the very end when they actually battle the Russians for a second. he still wins the victory. So at the end, it's like he gets to walk away with all the like, I did all this cool stuff. I get to be Top Gun trainer later in my career. I get to do whatever I want. I get the girl. But also, I'm a better guy because I went through this emotional experience of 8 weeks at Top Gun camp. Like, it's so easy. And I think, like, from a critical standpoint, like, we've seen that story 1,000 times. Dude comes in real cocky, gets knocked down a few pegs, still wins the day. Like, that's a tale as old as time, a song as old as rhyme. But, like, I think exactly right. The reason the audience score is so high is because it's quintessential 80s. You've got the blaring music, the, like, epicness of, and these are Navy pilots. Like, I'm from an Air Force family, and the amount of, like, making fun of Navy pilots that goes on in my family is high. And I'm not a military person at all, so I don't want to bash the Navy. But, like, I would say that Navy pilots are lower on the rung of pilots. That, especially if you're in the Air Force, you would consider them lower on the rung. But you know, it's still so high octane, so cool, like so fast and furious, like rolling through with the jets and I don't know, like the action sequences, though very little happens. Like most of it is training, you know? They don't even fight that often. There's like a fight at the beginning and a fight at the end, but most of it is them just like zipping around with their teachers, like learning how to fly. So I don't know. I think it's the combo of those two things. Like the plot is so simple, which makes it fun for an audience because we don't have to pay attention to it too much. We get to be overwhelmed with the awesomeness of the movie. But that also, from a critical standpoint, makes it a weak film.
Yeah, so ironic that a movie about planes is more about training.
Yeah, it's all about like, oh, we're learning how to be better. Like, and yet, man, you get invested in those sequences. There's so many sequences in the middle where, you know, the teacher is coming for him, and who's gonna win the dogfight or whatever. You get very invested.
Yeah, well, like it does have some really great shots, like the sound design with like the jets like coming by, and like also like the ocean shots. Like I'm a sucker for oceans, so like those are pretty cool.
Totally. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Also, like, you know, Danger Zone is like super iconic to the point where like it's in the zeitgeist, and like Archer says it a lot. He's always like, Danger Zone.
We have a shelf in my kitchen where, like, whenever you open the drawer, sometimes stuff falls out of it, and we call it the Danger Zone. Like, it's just, yeah, it's part of the zeitgeist. It became a term we use.
Oh man, I have to start using it that way for like something applicable in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I annoy people by singing it every time. But,
well, clearly they're not true fans.
Yeah. Well, and Kenny Loggins does 2 songs for the OG movie. He wasn't supposed to do Danger Zone. He does the beach volleyball scene. He does the beach volleyball song. And Toto was supposed to do Danger Zone, but Toto denied the offer. But like late in the game, like in post already, and they were like, oh shoot, we need to like wrap this up. So they were like, Kenny Loggins, you've already recorded 1 song. What if we double it, make it 2? And he was like, okay, how about Danger Zone? And they were like, all right, cool. We love this. They wanted a song called Top Gun, but Kenny Loggins, I guess in like 10 minutes wrote Danger Zone. I was like, here's Danger Zone. And they were like, well, that sounds really cool. I guess we'll take that. Like,
I'm glad you mentioned that because it reminded me of something I read while like doing research on like the first movie. But found this thing that said Judas Priest were asked to do a song called Reckless for the soundtrack.
Oh, that would have been wild.
But they decided not to because they thought the movie would flop. And ironically, like a couple years later, they did a cover of Johnny Be Good for a movie with that same name, like Johnny Be Good, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But that itself was a flop.
Wild. Yeah, I don't know. I guess a lot of people, because if you pitch that to someone, you say, okay, well, it's this movie and they're Navy pilots and they're all in school to become the best pilot. Like, that sounds like the dumbest movie of all time. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
so I don't know. I can imagine lots of people being like, "Well, no, this movie's never gonna succeed. I'm out. I'm out, man."
yeah, I mean, I don't know about the Toto thing, but they definitely did the soundtrack to Dune, which
Yeah,
is pretty wild because, like, I don't know if their soundtrack really meshes with like the story very well, but it's like just so cheesy and you can't like look away or I guess turn your ear away from it when like the guitar is like blaring or whatever.
yeah. That makes that movie so 80s, like so grounded in the 80s. They're doing a new one.
Yes.
A new Dune.
Yeah, I think that one's coming out in December. I've been like wondering whether or not I should try out the book. I've heard it's pretty dense though. So
Oh man, we could derail this entire podcast and talk about Dune for 2 hours, but I'll say this: Dune is one of my favorite books. If you are a sci-fi fan, which I'm pretty sure you are, it's an essential. It is dense. It's very like what the 1960s envisioned the future. So there's like a lot of weird clunkiness. Like the most advanced technology they have is just like really eccentric ways of poisoning people. But like it's a masterpiece and it is such a cool world. So if you're up for the denseness and the challenge of really diving deep into a book, to any of the listeners, recommend Dune 100%.
Yeah, and I mean I'm sure there's like some unabridged audio somewhere probably, so like maybe that would help with some of that.
Yeah, there's definitely audiobooks. I know Audible has one with someone cool doing it, and I forget who it is. It's like 36 hours or something.
Of course.
But yeah, if that's an easier way for you to get into it, by all means. It's a fascinating book. I love it.
Go to audiblefreetrial.com, use our code. No, we don't do that here.
I was like, dang, this podcast got backers.
No, this podcast is very low effort. Like,
well, not today. This episode is high octane. Top Gun 2, baby.
top notch. Talking about Top Gun.
Yeah. Oh man.
So yeah, true to form, the movie industry did the classic thing of making a sequel to something that's very beloved from like the 80s or so. And yeah, I was actually watching this show called Spoilers of Kevin Smith yesterday.
Oh yes, okay, I know this show.
Yeah, it's kind of weird watching now because like it's totally like 2012. Like they'll say this movie is playing right now, and I'm like, no, it's not. That was 8 years ago. But like,
yeah,
they were talking about Total Recall, and one of the people there, like one of the spoilers, was like, you know, Hollywood just did the classic thing of taking something from the 80s or 90s that people love, because they're talking about Total Recall, and
yeah,
he's like, and just putting that title on something new, and like, yeah, like I feel like for the past decade or so, like people have just been loving the 80s, so like, you know, we just had to have a Top Gun sequel, but like, what were your reactions to the trailer to Top Gun Maverick when it first like showed up on screens?
I was pumped. Because here's the thing, like, it's different than like an actually good movie. But like, you know, like it's not like it's Willy Wonka or like these movies that are like truly masterpieces. Like Top Gun is goofy and campy, even if it's taking itself really seriously, like it is campy and silly. And I feel like that makes it easier to have sequels or remakes or whatever of it, because it doesn't have this like beloved masterpiece status. It may be beloved, but it doesn't have the masterpiece status. So it doesn't need the like, it's not The Godfather, you know, where we're like, oh, we can never remake this. It's so good. You know, it's like, oh, we could do whatever we want with Top Gun. Also, like, I just love that world. It would be so interesting to see where these people are. It's not like Top Gun 2 2 years later, where it's like, we really don't need this. Like,
like over 30 years or something. So
And when you're looking at like military people, like that's a career. So much will have changed for these people, or wouldn't have, and that's equally interesting. Like that's like kind of cool. There's something neat about returning to a world so many years later. I think it does require like good storytelling and stuff. In order for this to be any good, it needed to do better than the first one in a plot. Like the plot needs to be more critically interesting and that kind of thing. But like, yeah, I was pumped just because I was like, oh, yes, I would love to see Tom Cruise in a cockpit, please. Like more of that. Plus the cast, when it was like all these people are in it, I was like, this is a good cast, even if the movie is meh. Like there will be good performances in this. Those were my first initial thoughts.
even if the movie ends up being Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. Not a great fan of the title. I think Top Gun 2 Maverick's Boogaloo or something.
Yeah. So this is how out of touch I was with like Top Gun, how very little I remembered from the first movie. Like when I saw the title in the trailer, like Top Gun Maverick, I thought that Maverick was like the name of like some jet or maybe like one of the ships that carries the jets or whatever. But like it took me so long to realize, oh wait, Maverick was Tom Cruise in the first movie.
This is the dude. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, like that trailer was, there's just something about it that felt kind of majestic, I guess. Like the cinematography and the music and like just like knowing so little about what was to come. And like I thought it was it was very subtle, but still had like a sort of fanfare quality to it. Like it felt like, oh, they're really trying to hone their craft and like the making of this movie. I don't know, like in terms of the story, but like in terms of the visual look and like I guess the music aesthetic, like maybe they're like really raising the bar.
Yeah. Well, it looks like my understanding is they used a lot of practical effects like they did in the first one, so like whether it was a cockpit simulator or like actually like getting the guys up in planes to experience the movement and stuff. That they did a lot of that in the production to like they did in the first one to get people understanding like this is what it feels like to be a pilot. Like, so it looks good. It doesn't look like, even if they CGI it up, it doesn't look like it. At least from the trailer, it didn't look like that to me.
I guess we'll get into like the movie proper. So like
totally.
Yeah, so like the beginning, I was kind of iffy about like what was going on because like the whole screen is black and it fades and you see like jets flying and it's like super quiet and like lots of us in the theater were like, wait, is the sound off or like what's going on? But it turns out it's like a creative choice showing the silent jets before you actually get to hear them like much later on. But like, well, I don't know. How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, it's definitely jarring. The payoff is when the jets start, like when they roar in, and you're like, oh, okay, we were doing this build up. I don't know. It was kind of like a weird artsy choice, but I didn't hate it. Like, I don't know. There was something about the delayed, like seeing everything and being like, what's going on, and then when the jet kind of flies in over you, like, I don't know, maybe 2.5, 3 minutes in, and then the sound happens when that happens. There's something cool about that, like, syncing effect, I don't know. It was an interesting start. Very different from the first movie where it, like, kicks in the door and guns blare and starts with Danger Zone. This had a very more chill, like, approach, which was maybe setting us up for the themes of the movie there, like the aging and the changes that have underwent the characters that we're seeing.
Yeah, because like you said, like this is like a whole career, like the whole gap between the first movie and Maverick. So like we get to see Maverick as like a flight instructor, and like we even get this brief montage of like highlights throughout his career, and they have like
Yeah.
these like they CGI'd younger Tom Cruise in these moments, but they were like super brief, so it wasn't as like in focus as like the beginning of like Tron Legacy or something like that.
Sure.
You know?
And Tom Cruise looks good, so even the CGI effect on him like wasn't super necessary. I feel like he looks a lot younger than he is, and I don't know. It's cool too to like watch the career and all the like hoops he had to jump through to stay in his position, because like one of the weird dichotomies with this movie for me is like they're always like, he's so good, but we've never promoted him. Like, you know, like he's had to do so much work to avoid promotion so that he doesn't get stuck behind a desk, kind of like what happened to Iceman, but we'll get to that later. But like, he has to keep being Maverick. He has to keep being the wild card. So they're like, oh, he's so good, but we can't promote him because he's Maverick, you know? Like,
Yeah.
He's too reckless. We can't put him in this position. He's too reckless. So I think that's like a funny like way of justifying, like, he's so good, he steals the best, except he's so reckless that we're going to keep him as a teacher instead of promoting him to like a admiral or something and making him sit behind a desk and make strategic decisions or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Star Trek, how, like, you know, you see Captain Kirk in the original series, and then later on in the movies, you've seen he's, like, promoted, and in his final movie, Generations, he tells Picard to never let them promote you to Admiral, because, like, you can do more difference on the bridge of a ship like the Enterprise, you know? So
Totally.
I had those parallels in mind while watching this.
Yeah, it's with anywhere, you know, like if you have any teacher friends, you know, like a lot of times really good teachers get promoted to principal, and then they feel like they're less effective or whatever. I think there's something cool about Maverick knowing where he's needed most, where his skills are best, and choosing to like not tank his career, but like hurt his upward advancement to stay where he is best.
Kind of like trying to strategically not get every answer correct on the test, you know, all the answers to, right? Like, try and make it like 90 or 80 something.
Yeah, try to get the B+. But you know all the answers, so like how many do you fail to keep your average low or whatever? Yeah, it's exactly what it is. I don't know, it's cool. It's funny because it's like that probably could never happen in an actual military setting, but Tom Cruise can dream, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this movie feels grounded, but I'm sure there are like some liberties here and there taken in terms of like how things work within this like military structure type of thing.
Sure.
Maverick, like how different and similar did he feel to you?
He definitely is still Maverick. He's got all the quality, you know, he does the flyby. Like one of the first things we see him do is do the flyby, even though he's not supposed to. Like, we see that in the first movie, we see that in this movie, he does it multiple times in both movies. Like, he's still Maverick, he's still kind of a punk, he still, like, does what he wants, he's still so, you know, cocksure, but, like, I think he's definitely also really grown into the mentor figure. Like, I think his journey, like, in the first movie sets the scene for him in this movie where he really understands the dangers and the
danger zone.
Yeah. Yes, but like I think he understands what's at stake and what's at risk for all these pilots, and I think he's like in a place where he can still be the kind of cocky Maverick, but he like has really come to terms with you know, like, this is high stakes, this is important. I like to goof around. I know you guys like to goof around, but like, you know, also this is serious. So it's like kind of fun to see like, he's still cool. He's still got the motorcycle, you know, he's still doing fun tricks in the air, but he like also can mellow out and be the voice of reason and like understand the seriousness of something as the teacher in this. Like, he's still the main character, but he's grown into a mentor role. It's totally different.
Yeah, and speaking of like instructors, like I know Charlie was a huge part of the first movie, and it takes a while for her to get so much as a mention because, like in this movie, Maverick is like with like he's really into this single mother played by Jennifer Connelly. Her name is Penny Benjamin.
Yeah, she's in the first movie, or well, they mention her, Maverick, because she's the Admiral's daughter, who Maverick had a little thing with. That's like all they mention about her is like Maverick had this thing with the Admiral's daughter. So it's cool that they like brought that to life. But yeah, no Charlie, which is kind of a bummer.
Right, but it does feel realistic to me how, like, you know, there'd be that love interest from, like, decades ago, and, like, you know, like, some relationships do last that long, like, it's very, I guess, hard to do, like, to make that happen with
It's very
certain people.
80s. It's very 80s vibe, right? Like, guy gets the girl and they're together forever. And so it is kind of a breath of fresh air that this takes a more realistic approach and was like, well, that, like, Charlie was Washington, like, Pentagon bound, you know? There was no way she was going to stick around at Top Gun forever. She was a, like, impressive astrophysicist. Like, she had bigger and better things to do than stay at Top Gun because she liked Tom Cruise.
Yeah. And I think I was okay with, like, this change, because, like, that whole, like, instructor-student thing that they had in the first movie felt weird to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and, I don't know, Jennifer Connelly is so good. She's so good in this role. She's so, like, brings such depth and, like, nuance to a movie that I feel like would be lacking that, with more of just like, well, Kelly McGillis is here and she was the 80s bombshell. I feel like they might have like shoved her more to the side if they tried to keep Charlie in the movie. So by bringing in this new role and by bringing heavy hitter Jennifer Connelly in, like, and tying it into like the Admiral and like the old, like, they had this fling even before Maverick met Charlie. Like, it just brings so much nuance and neat, like, specificity to
like,
this movie.
Continuity.
Yeah, like, I don't know. And it makes sense. Like, they're both just living there, single, sort of, like, had their bad lucks in romance. Like, of course they'd be drawn to each other. It feels very realistic, which the movie overall doesn't have the most realistic vibe. So that's cool to have that grounding, like, in it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that, like, they're the ones who are together, because, like, I think Jennifer Connelly and I think her character from Labyrinth and Tom Cruise also starred in a different fantasy movie in the 80s called Legend, which...
Oh, love Legend. So bad, but so good.
Oh, I don't
That's
think
my
it's
theme for
bad
80s
at all.
movies. Oh, man. It's so... I guess it gets pitched as a kid's movie, and it's just not. And maybe that's why I saw it when I was, like, 6 and was just terrified out of my mind.
Which version have you seen? Because there's the UK version with the Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack.
Yes.
And then there's an extended director's cut version of that. But, like, the US theatrical version had the Tangerine Dream soundtrack, which is my preference.
Yes. Oh, really? I like the Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack. It feels Lord of the Ringsy to me. So maybe that's my own personal bias. I think the 80s soundtrack is so cool. The Tangerine Dream, like, 80s vibe is so great. And that's the movie I've seen the most. But most recently I watched the director's cut, so the Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack, and really liked it. Was a fan.
Yeah, like, I think my bias toward the Tangerine Dream soundtrack is partially due to my favorite singer, John Anderson, being on it. Like,
oh, totally.
So, like, naturally, like, you know, he sings a song Loved by the Sun, which is really good. And,
oh, yeah.
But, yeah, like, I don't see Legend as a kid's movie, because it feels to me more like one of those mythic fairy tale type of things where, like, these like, dark things happen. But, like, I could imagine, like, the tale of Legend getting watered down for kids, you know?
Sure. I mean, there's unicorns. Like, like, that like makes it, I don't know. I think just like bad advertising, like, oh, a fantasy movie. My 6-year-old loves fantasy movies. Let me put this in. Oh, there's a literal devil man, like, who scared my kid for the rest of his life. Like,
recently the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance was nominated for like outstanding children's program, and it's like, are you
because
sure
it's puppets? Like, because we can't have adult puppet content, I guess.
Well, like you watch the like soul draining and like characters dying and like these creatures with their mouths that are sewn shut, and it's like, are you sure this is a children's program?
Yeah, it's dark. Even the OG movie's dark.
Yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah. We also get this other tie to the first film in the form of Rooster, Goose's son, and here he's played by Miles Teller. What do you think of that casting choice?
I like Miles Teller. It is funny when they like from the minute I saw him in the trailer, he grew the little mustache, and I was like, oh, he looks like Anthony Edwards, who played Goose. He looks just like the kid of that character. Like they did a good job matching him in vibe. Like I was like, oh, immediately I know who this is. This is his kid. Which and the way he looked so similar, I was like, oh, this is going to be a huge plot point for Maverick to be teaching Goose's kid and have to deal with like the feelings of guilt that he sort of lets go at the end of the first movie, but like are always going to be with him, and like now have to really hit heavy. Plus, I think Miles Teller did a good job. I think he's like, Whiplash was one of my favorite movies, and I feel like Miles Teller is so good in that. And like he's done some bad stuff, Fantastic Four or whatever.
Fantastic.
Oh God, so bad. But I feel like Miles Teller is like really well suited for this role. He, the young gun who like, my dad was in the Top Gun program, and I gotta be that. Like he's fitting for that. And helps like round out this like ensemble. He's the young blood for the ensemble, because there's also Ed Harris in here, so it's a lot of like older heavy hitting actors, and then you've got a younger heavy hitter. I feel like so I really like Miles Teller. I think he does a great job, and I'm invested in his story. I'm invested in his need for speed. His need to prove himself against the ghost of his dad, who he basically never knew. And the way that he unites with Maverick as a mentor and father figure, I think is like that perfect circle of life type story. It's like, yes, like that makes sense. The two dudes who were robbed of their best friend or their dad would, of course, be on similar pages. And despite initial tension because of Tom Cruise's like involvement in Goose's death, I think Rooster comes around.
I also loved Miles Teller in Whiplash, like how furious he was in different moments of that movie, and the payoff at the end is so good. And you get to see a bit more of like him doing some musical stuff in Top Gun Maverick. Like there's that scene with the piano where like he's like playing like a piano cover of Sorry Not Sorry. And and like Maverick walks in, and it gives him like this flashback of like that scene in the first movie where like Rooster as a kid is in the room and Goose is still there, and like you get like this silent flashback of them playing the song they played in that movie, and it's like
totally
you could see the weight in Maverick's eyes, and like they have this discussion. Like Rooster is like, why didn't you ever visit after my dad died? And
like, where were you, man?
Yeah, and it's like, it's understandable that, like, it might hurt so much for Maverick to, like, have to be reminded of that tragedy, like, constantly. But I feel like it brings more realism to like if you go and rewatch the first movie and you're like, okay, then not everything is resolved, like this is something that'll stick with Maverick for a while, and it's like still haunts him to this day. So I thought that was really grounding.
It's a cool way to bring it back in without it being Godfather 3-esque, where like Michael is still just like, I'm still torn up about this. Like, it was a cool way to have the constant touchstone of Rooster being like the constant reminder for Maverick. Not just like, Maverick doesn't just sit around all mopey all day being like, oh, Goose, I'm still glum. It's like, yeah, he's going through that process. That grieving process will never end for him, but then he gets constantly bombarded with Rooster. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just like he's around Rooster all the time, and that's like hitting him hard. So I liked that a lot. Yeah. And we get a surprise cameo from Meg Ryan in the scene where Maverick goes to Rooster's house.
Yeah, that was a real trip down memory lane, and like the discussion that they have, and like memories of Goose. Like, we even get these like little anecdotes of like, you know, they talk about like stories passed down by like Goose's family about what he would do as a kid, like, you know,
yeah,
catching butterflies with a net or whatever, and like the butterflies inspiring him to like want to fly someday.
Yeah. It's cool. It was I love scenes like that where you get one character just in this one scene, you know, and then that's it. Like that, we saw Meg Ryan for maybe 3 minutes of the movie. Like that was it. But it was such a nice, just like, oh, cool. Because that's how it would really be. Like, that relationship wouldn't end in real life. You know, they would continue to mourn together and stuff, I feel. So that was cool to see that touched upon again.
Yeah, because they talk about how, like, even though Maverick didn't visit, like, he would call her every now and then and, like, catch each other up. And I guess it's more painful for him to look at Rooster growing up because, like, as he gets older, he looks more and more like his dad, and, like, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, it makes it even more painful seeing, like, the spitting image of his best friend. So I thought that was very understandable.
Totally.
But yeah, like, even though that Meg Ryan cameo was brief, it was very, like, she had a presence and she felt like the same character, but, like, with some growth internally.
Yeah, well, and she had remarried, and it was very like, yes, this feels like a normal, like, they gave this character some closure for us as the viewer. Like, okay, cool, we know what happened to her after, and Goose is still like an important part of her life and everyone's life. But like, also she, like, you know, continued to go through that process, and that was cool. And it was just cool to see her back in that character. You know, she has such a fun, like, spunky, silly vibe in the first movie. To see her now as an older woman, like, return to that personality was very fun, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I thought it was really funny when they revealed that the person she remarried was played by Tom Hanks. Because it's like that classic Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan thing.
Yeah, like, oh, so good. Jen, just to have him, like, walk through the scene, basically, for, like, a second. What a, like, goofy cameo. What an 80s move to throw into this 2020 movie. You know, like, loved it.
Yeah, and we get a brief interaction between Rooster and his stepdad, like, toward the end of that scene. And even though it's not a lot, I do like how it's clear that, like, he and his stepdad don't have this antagonistic relationship, because I feel like it's very easy for some movies to fall into like making the step parent like a bad person or whatever.
Totally.
Like, when I watched the first Ant-Man movie, it felt refreshing to see that, like, the girl's stepdad, like, genuinely cared about her, you know?
Yeah, like, it's nice also, like, that he, like, it's cool that Rooster's kind of journey in the movie is learning from each of his three father figures. So whether that's Goose, who he never knew in real life, but certainly is affecting him in his life, his stepdad, who, like, was a dad to him and a good one, and Maverick, who, like, has the connection to his real dad and also is his mentor at the school and for the missions, but, like, is also stepping into that mentor father figure role. It's cool to watch, as all of these are good father influences on Rooster and good masculine influences, you know, and there's not a lot of like bad energy amongst the three of them.
Yeah, and we also see Rooster's interactions with the other like pilot trainees that Maverick's instructing. Like there's Hangman, who's played by Glenn Powell, and
Yeah.
Bob, who's played by Lewis Pullman, and a couple others. But yeah, we see these brief interactions with them, and like they don't really have big character arcs, but they do provide a good soundboard for Rooster when he's like going through his problems. So, like, I feel like this really is as much a Rooster movie as it is a Maverick movie. So like that
Totally
matters more.
And Rooster has the opposite problem that Maverick does. Maverick is too cocky, whereas Rooster is lacking in that confidence. And like what Maverick is really bringing to the table for him is like, you can do this. Be assured of yourself. So when Rooster eventually does the flyby, at the tower, even though he's not supposed to, it's like a huge step for him because he's like growing into the like, I can be a Maverick-esque pilot. I can be this good pilot. He has Maverick and Rooster have equal and opposite journeys that intersect in the middle. One of them has to become more, they have to both become more like the other one, more assured of himself or more cautious and considerate. And Maverick has always been on that journey. But Rooster's just starting his of becoming more like confident in himself. So it's kind of cool to watch the intersection there.
Yeah, and we also see that in Rooster's room, he has like a Star Trek Into Darkness poster, which I guess Paramount really wants to advertise one of their more controversial Star Trek films.
Yes, really plug it in there.
But I just thought of this right now, but like Rooster's path is very similar to, like, going back to Star Trek again, like it's very similar to Captain Kirk in those newer movies. Like he lost his dad as a baby in that 2009 reboot movie, and like he goes on the path that his dad goes. So yeah, it's pretty wild, those parallels.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then to have the poster in there, I wonder if they're trying to tell us something. It's a new cinematic universe involving Star Trek and Top Gun.
Like this Top Gun thing ends up becoming Starfleet in the future.
Rooster freezes himself, and then it's part of Starfleet. Oh, man.
Yeah, Rooster also has the habit of waking up really early, which I guess is why he has that nickname. Like, you get this, like, really gorgeous shot of, like, the sunrise in the background. It's like a profile shot, and it's like some of the cinematography in this movie is just beautiful.
Yeah, well, when we're back in Mar Loma, like we're back in gorgeous California coast, like seeing the same vibe, even though there's like a little bit of difference, obviously because 30 years have passed, but we see like the same town, the same vibe, this like gorgeous California area, for at least like a good chunk of the movie while Rooster's doing the training before they fly off on the mission.
Right. I mean, it's not like the difference between Hill Valley in like Back to the Future in 1985 and Hill Valley in futuristic 2015. Sure.
It's not like that, but it's yeah, I don't know, it's cool. It's gorgeously cinematographed. I don't know how to make that word a verb. Gorgeously designed and executed in the shots. It feels very similar to the first movie. You know, there's so many there's that cool shot of like Tom Cruise on the motorcycle zipping through the sunset with Jennifer Connelly on the back. There's just like so many neat shots that are so akin to the previous film. You know, them walking away from the planes, it matches so many of the times that they did that in the first film. Like the DP and the crew on this film really used inspiration from that first film to get those shots to match, so that it doesn't just feel like a sequel, but it feels like a continuation of the world that's already been set up.
Yeah, I feel like some movies try to recreate certain shots like exactly, but for some reason they didn't feel too overt to me in this. I don't know if it's because I haven't seen the first movie as many times, or if it's just like subtle enough to the point where it works. But
Yeah, I felt like it was. I mean, there were definitely like there's some iconic shots in Top Gun that I was like, okay, this is that shot. They're doing the same thing. It was subtle enough that it worked for me, because like all the steamy romance scenes between Maverick and Penny are very similar to the steamy romance scenes between Maverick and Charlie. The lighting is the same. The like wind blowing through the curtains is the same. The way they kiss is so similar, but it didn't feel like, oh, we're just redoing that scene. It felt different. It felt similar but different. So I don't know. I liked it.
yeah, I mean, it does feel like a different relationship. Like, it doesn't feel exactly the same. It's just that some of the visual stuff kind of goes through some of the same motions, but
yeah,
definitely feels like it's kind of like if you have a burger, it's not gonna always taste exactly the same, you know?
Sure, totally. Yeah, but it's still a burger, and that
was a weird analogy.
It's still a Top Gun movie, you know? Yeah, but I get it. I mean, I get exactly where you're coming from. This is still a Top Gun movie. It's gonna feel like a Top Gun movie, even if everything's a little bit different. So,
also, what did you think of how Iceman was depicted in this one?
I have been waiting for this question. So because Val Kilmer battled throat cancer 3 or 4 years ago, and it totally altered his voice. Which you can definitely hear. He's got Val Kilmer used to have a very deep sort of masculine voice, and now his voice is a lot higher and raspier. But I think they did a good job. Obviously, Iceman, being the stellar pilot that he was, did the exact thing we talked about at the beginning that Tom Cruise avoided having happen. Iceman got promoted. Now he's some high up admiral, running so many things. But it's really cool. And obviously that's weighed on him and aged him. I think they kind of used Kilmer's physical and vocal shifts because of his battle with throat cancer, as a way to show the kind of the stress that Iceman is now under, and the way that that's changed for him. His whole life has totally changed. But it was cool to watch he had the similar to Rooster and Tom Cruise having equal and opposite journeys that intersect in the middle. Iceman and Maverick have equal and opposite journeys that also intersect in the middle. Whereas they're both these amazing, stellar pilots. And what that meant for Maverick was he wanted to teach those skills to the future pilots, but he had to keep avoiding the bureaucratic red tape to stay where he was. Whereas Iceman went into the bureaucratic vibe and is now totally running the Navy. I think it's cool. I think he was used sparingly, and I think that was what we needed. I think if he's in those 2 scenes. He's in the one where Maverick goes to visit him and talk about Rooster, and then the one at the end when they're on the mission. I think that's all we needed of Iceman. Top Gun is and always will be Maverick's story. And there's an alternate universe where there's a Top Gun that is Iceman's story, and where he's where Maverick is just a jerk, and you see why Iceman hates him the whole time. But the movie makes it very clear, the original and this one makes it very clear that Maverick, despite his flaws, is the hero we're rooting for. And so Iceman, who has all these different flaws and none of the same flaws, is a different hero. And so it's cool that gets heavily reflected in the way that their careers took off.
Yeah, you could see the different trajectories that they took, but they still feel like the same characters. It's just that they've gone through all this change.
Yeah.
It's also there are a few moments where it was hard for me not to think of X-Men because Iceman, and there's also There's also this other trainee played by Monica Barrow. Her nickname was Phoenix, and that naturally makes me think of the Phoenix Saga. So. Sure.
Well, and Iceman does kind of have a bit of a Professor X vibe. He pretty much all his scenes, he's just sitting at a desk or kind of up and pacing. He's become very much the stationary hub for all of the rest of the characters to go out and be the the Wolverine, the Cyclops, the Storm, going out and doing the thing, where he sort of is hanging back and doing strategy. He kind of does have a little bit of that Professor X vibe,
Yeah, and like he has these like facial expressions where it's like it seems like he's trying to read someone's mind, like even if he can't literally do that. Like, yeah, I definitely see what you mean.
Yeah, and he's got like Iceman always had like he was cocky too, but he had a little more of the patience, like in the scene in the original movie when Goose dies, Iceman is really trying to get the shot. He's like really focused in, honed in. And I like that carries over into this. Like there's a lot of that like intense focus and intense stare, and he's got a lot slower pace than Maverick. Like that was the biggest thing I noticed, and maybe a change from the original movie, but he's definitely slowed down. Like Maverick is still go, 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 go. Yeah, he may have mellowed, but he's still Maverick. He's still teaching the instructors. He gets in a plane every week and flies around, like this is what he does. Whereas Iceman has had to sit and think and make strategic decisions, and has gotten the time to do that and the need to do that, right? Like the pilot in the first movie, which it gets echoed when he's teaching in the second movie, he talks about how when you're up there, you don't really get a chance to think. You have a couple seconds, then you got to do it. Otherwise you're dead. Whereas Iceman now has all the time to think and needs to, because he has to make decisions that aren't split decisions. He has to make very focused decisions. So I like that change in pace and the way he's so slow and methodical, and that bothers Maverick. But of course they're still good friends from, 40 years ago. So that's a long friendship. I mean, that's my longest friendship is 10 years. So 40 years that's a trek. That's pretty good.
Was that Trek an intentional reference?
Yeah, no, but we'll say it was to make me look good.
So yeah, obviously there's like friction between Rooster and Maverick, and they like talk through it as we like see like these training sequences with like him and the other like trainees. And for much of the movie, they keep the specialized mission that they're being trained for a secret, like to the audience at least.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which
is kind of nice. Like, it's there, that's what they're working on, but it also feels a little realistic. I feel like top secret stuff like that isn't like, it comes in stages, right? Like you don't get all the info right at once. Like this is what's going to happen. So it's that for us to also be in the same place as the cadets, and even Maverick to an extent, not knowing exactly all the things that are going to happen right away, that feels cool and keeps us invested. I think it fixes a little bit of the plot from the first one, which is just like dudes training. It's like, okay, there's a mystery here that we as the audience are trying to solve, which I think also results in a higher critical score for this movie.
I think one of the interesting things about this movie is like the mystery that was surrounding it. Like we weren't sure like every little thing that was gonna happen, and this mission was like no exception. But I don't know, did this mission feel like a good payoff for like after all the mystery they were building up toward it?
It's so clunky that it's the Russians again. It's so so predictable and so like silly America, like where we're like, oh, it's the Russians are still bad. Like, I don't know. It feels so like, oh, okay. I don't know. It feels in a way that the first movie, like the ending is kind of anticlimactic. Like there's like these 6 Russian planes that sort of are flying too close to American territory, so they go scare them away, and they do shoot 4 of them out of the sky. But like, it kind of feels, it doesn't have it has a little bit of intensity because it's the longest fight and it's the most like intense, and Iceman and Maverick are working together in that one. But it like seems like, oh, okay, they like win and that dogfight was over, and like when you sit back and look at it, the stakes are pretty low, and it feels so similar in this. It's like they trained for this whole thing, and then they're just doing like a kind of a stealth plane flyover of Russian territory, like in the, you know, like, and it's like a dogfight, and it is interesting, and like it's the finale of the movie, you know, but it, like, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, as with anything like all encompassing, like the struggle between two nations without an all out war, it's so hard to have a winner, like, because it's like, we may have, we got what we came for in this mission, except in the grand scheme of things, it's like, okay, it's not like Lord of the Rings where like Mordor falls into the earth and Sauron explodes. It's like, you know, where it's like, okay, cool, like they freaking won, and that's the end of the story. You know, it's like, cool, we got this little small victory. Yeah. They like try to build it up with the same intensity, but it's not the same, you know, like, so like it's a bit of a letdown, but it also is like, it's the only way, like you can't have Tom Cruise and Miles Teller fly in there and just blow the Russians to hell, you know, like that would equally not make any sense. So I think it's what they can get away with realistically while still having a win. But yeah, it's like, it's kind of cheesy, and like, of course it's the Russians and we're doing this stealth mission, and okay, like, I don't know, it's a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I mean, they do update the movie a little bit. Like, they try to make it more, like, they try to make it politically correct to the point where, like, it doesn't feel too much like old attitudes, but it still feels like too much of a throwback to, like, you know, like, it's like, wait, what year does this movie take place in now? Like, did they time travel or something? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, or like, are we just, is there like this weird vibe in the Top Gun movies where the Cold War just has never really stopped? Like, what is the deal? I don't know. It's fun. I think it's the only way to end the movie. Like, because if you didn't have that sequence, it would be totally worthless and boring. So it's nice that they built to something, but also, like, I don't know. I think the fact that they kept it a secret for so long, like the first movie starts with a dogfight between the Russians. They go to training, and then they come back to a dogfight between the Russians. And this movie, it's like, oh, there's a secret mission. And when it's finally revealed, it's like, oh, and it's another dogfight with the Russians. Okay. Like, I don't know.
Like, the sequence did look really cool, I'll admit. But I just feel like they could have been more creative with, like, the circumstances surrounding it. Like, it could have been, like, something else, and, like, it didn't really live up to, like, the mystery that was being built up. I don't know what I was expecting, honestly.
They played it very safe. It felt like a very safe choice.
Yeah, it feels too, like, been there, done that. But,
yeah,
like, some of the discourse surrounding this, that I've been reading, like, online on, like, Reddit and stuff, is, like, people being like, well, I mean, the movie is more about the Rooster and Maverick relationship, so that sequence toward the end doesn't really matter that much, but then you have...
Yeah, it's just a way for them to work together. And with Iceman kind of being the Admiral calling the shots, like, it gets all of the characters with all the differing viewpoints on how to be Top Gun all together in one position, having to do a mission. So yes, I agree with that point. From the story standpoint, it totally is the climax. From a action movie standpoint, it's a weak climax.
Right, I agree. But we do get this heart-to-heart between Rooster and Maverick at the end, you know, bringing closure to the whole thing, which I think is nice, at least. Like, it would have felt really anticlimactic if they just, like, went to credits right after that, like, whole sequence. But
it's nice that they come back home and they're able to kind of, I mean, because they have that kind of fight right before the mission about, like, what they should do and who should be calling the shots on that, and, like, whose strategy's best. And so it's nice that they end up working together and working that out and being like, we have two very different viewpoints, but I see the value in what you bring to the table. Similar to the way Maverick and Iceman sort of have the same vibe at the end of the first movie, you know, like, you can be my wingman anytime. You know, like, they even repeat that line. It's like, okay, it's cheesy, but it's like, yeah, like, cool.
I do think there was a good payoff, like, at the very end when, like, they go up in the air again, and you finally get Danger Zone blaring through the speakers. It's like that callback to like the original.
Right.
I also really liked the score overall. Like, it just made the movie feel like it had matured a bit more from like the original, you know?
Yeah, it's fun. Like, I'm glad they threw in I love that they threw in Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away, and obviously the Top Gun theme. Like, I love that they threw those songs back in, like, for parts of the movie that made sense. But it was cool to have a more a nice combo of score and 80s music and more modern music, and like some cool scoring with like the Top Gun theme that was like less electric guitar and a little slowed down and mellower. Like, there was some neat shifts in the music that I think grounded the movie and kept it in the vibe that it was going for. This like definite time has passed and things have changed vibe.
Yeah, so like hats off to Hans Zimmer and Harold Faltermeyer. They did a good job on this.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess with that we can go into final thoughts. So
Sure.
So what are your final thoughts on Top Gun Maverick and score out of 10?
For me, I feel like it is everything you could want from a follow-up sequel, this with this much time in between. It totally grasps the personalities of all the characters, the journey that they've gone through in the time that we haven't seen, in the time from the first movie to now. The relationships that were formed in that movie are still intact, still strong, have grown over the 30 some odd years that they've that we haven't as an audience seen. And we see that executed well by the actors and by the style of filmmaking to really just capture the essence of like old wounds will still be there forever. But also like things change. I think they capture that so well in plot, in cinematography, in the way that the story's told, in the way that the characters have grown. There's still some of the old stuff that they're hanging on to, but they've also changed so much. So for me, I give it a 9 out of 10. It's pretty solid.
All right, so 9 out of 10 from you. I agree with some of those sentiments. Like, it feels like some of the classic stuff is there, but there's also more newness to it. Like, I feel like some 80s sequels or revivals kind of fall into this trap of doing some of the same things over again to the point where it feels ham-fisted. And there was a little bit of that with like the mission at the end. So
Totally.
So some points off because of that. But I think overall, like the main draw for me was the personal relationship, like the whole like Maverick and Rooster like trying to talk through like the stuff they're still going through, like the aftermath of what happened with Goose in the first movie, and trying to like grow still even after all these years, which feels very realistic, very grounded, and like just the movie overall looks gorgeous, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's beautiful.
So I don't know if this will be a controversial opinion, but I think this movie won up the first one.
Yes, it will. The old one has the nostalgia going for it, but I would say if you looked at them purely as two films, this is a better executed film.
Yeah, so I think I'd give Top Gun Maverick an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so with that, thanks again for joining me on this, Vinny. Do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Sure. I play with Comedy Sports. We're doing a lot of digital shows right now. So I'm in Chicago. So even if you're not in Chicago, you can tune in. Like the page on Facebook. It's CSZ Chicago. It's a competitive team improv, which you may be familiar with. But we do shows every Friday, Saturday night. We do 4 shows a weekend. So if you're interested in seeing some free live or live on screen comedy that's made up on the spot, please check us out. Otherwise, not doing too much, watching movies.
Sounds very cool and very creative. Yeah, comedy is just great all around,
Yeah, it's definitely a bright light when you're having a tough day. So
yeah. As for my plugs, you can find me at Steven Shinder on Instagram and Twitter, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook. You can find my fantasy horror comedy novel Lemons on My Brain, which is on Amazon. More info on that at stevenshinder.com. I'm also helping out a bit with memes and articles over at Culture Slate. So yeah, you can find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, cultureslate.com. We also have a Twitch and a YouTube, I believe. I'll link those in the show notes.
Cool.
But yeah, I finally remembered to plug Culture Slate in one of these. I kept forgetting in the other episodes. And if you'd like to email the podcast, you can do so by writing to delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of our coverage or any of the movies and whatnot that we've talked about, and we may read your thoughts on the show. So, yeah, be the first, because there haven't been any yet. Yeah. So,
be the first.
Yeah, be the top fan, like the Top Gun logo, but with fan replacing gun.
Totally.
Next episode will be a review of Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Without further delay, have a good day.
No mention of some of the characters like Fanboy in the review. Still, I'm sure Steven will have his uses. Get ready, Steven, because you are about to get integrated into the danger zone.